from the bloody streets of Tehran to a media controversy in Britain.
They wave information in front of them and say, can you write a story along these lines?
Attacks on Press TV are orchestrated by the American Embassy. That's clear from the leaks in WikiLeaks.
The question is Ofcom being used as part of this campaign?
Told me you cannot even speak to your bank manager.
So it wasn't just a closure, it was a freezing of the accounts.
This episode of In Focus will be asking why it seems that the British state, in conjunction with various media outlets and politicians, are trying to silence Press TV. This is the Stone of Free Speech, located in the heart of London's Hampstead Heath. Hundreds of years ago, it is said that people would gather right at this spot to discuss a whole variety of political and religious issues variant to the time. Since then, Western governments have taken up the cause of free speech, defending it vociferously around the world. The reality, however, seems to be something quite different. This episode of In Focus will be asking why it seems that the British state, in conjunction with various media outlets and politicians, are trying to silence Press TV. Recently, Press TV has been found in breach of Ofcom broadcasting codes after an Iranian-Canadian journalist, Majid Bahari, brought a case against the channel for airing an interview with him whilst he was in prison in Iran after the post-election riots of 2009. This is a news report which has been the cause of all of this controversy. Unfortunately, for legal reasons, we can't play the clip to you, but I can read to you the transcript of what Mr. Bahari said in his interview. He says, "On Monday the 15th of June, I sent a report about the attack against the base, a military base of Basij, to Channel 4 News as well as to Newsweek magazine." And that was it. This short 10-second segment has been the cause of so much controversy. Ofcom, the telecommunications regulator, upheld Bahari's complaint, claiming that Press TV had not respected Mr. Bahari's privacy. However, when they gave their reasoning for their decision, it all seemed somewhat vague. The Press TV interview with Mr. Bahari was played out on the 1st of July 2009. He didn't return to London until the middle of October 2009. But yet it took him 2 whole months, not until the 15th of December 2009, for Mr. Bahari to make his complaint to Ofcom. Yet, in a recent BBC interview with BBC Farsi, Mr. Bahari says that he was under threat of execution the whole time he was there.
گفتن که رویه قضایی هم 6 سال شاید طول بکشه، بعد از این 6 سال شاید معذرت خواهی بکنیم از شما و شما رو بفرستیم بیرون، یا اینکه اعدام میشید. و گفتم به احتمال زیاد هم اعدام میشید.
So for somebody who was so afraid of being executed while he was there and had gone through such an ordeal, why did it take him 2 whole months for him to make his complaint? It's debatable whether Mr. Bahari was influenced by other parties to complain to Ofcom whilst he was on bail. Ofcom also emphasised that Press TV did not provide unedited footage in order to support its defence. The channel, however, doesn't have to do so, seeing as how Ofcom's own regulations state that broadcasters need only keep unedited footage for 60 days. Ofcom found Press TV guilty of breaching British broadcasting rules, saying that they had infringed upon Mr. Bahari's right to privacy. However, in a recent BBC Radio 4 interview, 2 Libyan soldiers who had been captured by the opposition were interviewed under duress. Mr. Bahari's interview wasn't a confession, nor was he being shown to confess to anything illegal. However, the BBC interview goes much further than that and actually shows the soldiers admitting to committing rape.
I'm in a small room in a detention centre here in Misrata, and on the sofa are 2 very young-looking captured Gaddafi soldiers. They're both wearing green uniforms, blood-spattered and filthy. They've been brought in here by the prison authorities, who say both men confessed to raping women during the siege of this city.
And he said, they took the girls upstairs, and we were told to stay on the roof until the officers, finished the rape, and then we were asked to rape the girls too.
When questioned by the show's presenter about whether the soldiers were under duress, the correspondent Andrew Harding answered that it was hard to say, and that I couldn't find a reason not to believe them.
It is hard to say. They were in a detention camp. They appear to have offered this testimony voluntarily, and although they looked very quiet and very nervous, I couldn't find a reason not to believe them.
But do you think the British government have used Bahari in their case?
Well, I know nothing about this man, Bahari. I didn't see his story in the beginning, and I didn't see the Press TV 10-second interview with him. I personally believe that Press TV could have handled, from what I've read, the interview with this man better. And I think Press TV itself concedes that. But I'm in no doubt at all that this story is a pretext for closing us down.
However, the Bahari case is not the first tactic being used to try to pressure Press TV. Since its launch, Press TV, its staff and its reputation have come under constant attack in an attempt to silence it. On July the 2nd, 2007, the world witnessed the birth of Press TV, a brand new channel which claimed it was trying to challenge the stranglehold of the mainstream media, being the voice of the voiceless and offering viewers a different point of view on all the major news events from around the world. On December the 27th, 2008, the world looked on in horror as Israel launched an invasion of the Gaza Strip, and Press TV was quite literally at the forefront of reporting events. It was after the 22-day war on Gaza that Press TV began to quickly gain prominence and saw a rapid rise in viewer figures. And it was also at this point that the attempts to silence the channel commenced, as the complaints to Ofcom began to flood in.
This is Sky News at 10. Iranians are openly confronting security forces on the streets of Tehran.
As the fallout from the Iranian presidential elections began to develop, television channels all over the world gave wall-to-wall coverage of the demonstrations. In many cases, this coverage was simply one-sided. An example of this was the coverage of an attack against a military base, where a number of commentators simply focused on the response of the security forces and not on the use of petrol bombs and other violent means by the protesters. Press TV once again found itself under the spotlight. The BBC aired a Newsnight programme, which gave the impression that Press TV had somehow got into trouble with Ofcom. In reality, Ofcom was simply looking into a complaint which had just been made. Later, Ofcom dismissed that complaint, yet the BBC did not cover this fact. The programme also attacked Press TV's British presenters, as a way to criticise their involvement with the channel.
From the bloody streets of Tehran to a media controversy.
Channel 4 aired a report which brought up Mr. Bahari's case. In spite of the fact that it was still under investigation by Ofcom, this created an unfair prejudice against Press TV with regards to the Bahari case. They went as far as displaying the words televised confession next to a picture of Mr. Bahari, even though nothing Mr. Bahari said in his 10-second segment represented a confession. They even showed footage which Press TV never aired, giving the impression that this footage was used by Press TV in its original report, whereas Press TV only showed a 10-second clip. The entire report was deemed so misleading that Press TV themselves submitted a complaint to Ofcom about the tone and content of the segment. The campaign took a much more serious turn, with NatWest taking the unprecedented step of freezing Press TV's bank account.
On 7th of December, we have realized that there are some issues with the bank accounts, and basically we couldn't use our bank facilities.
This is NatWest headquarters, isn't it?
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm a journalist, basically.
I have called the bank manager, but he refused to answer the phone. Finally, I have tried to call the bank, and they have told me you cannot even speak to your bank manager.
This is an abrupt freezing of the accounts. It wasn't just a closure, it was a freezing of the accounts. The letter didn't refer to any particular contact names, no email addresses. It's an appalling demonstration of a commercial decision, really, because this doesn't look like it's a commercial decision.
In December 2010, thousands of students came out to the streets of London and other towns in Britain to protest against the massive increase in tuition fees. Press TV's live coverage of these clashes between students and security forces was unique, and during the course of the demonstrations, one of Press TV's news crews were attacked by masked men. This coverage was said to have caused considerable discomfort to the British government.
Labour's candidate for mayor is criticised for taking money to appear on a TV channel funded by Iran.
Another tactic which has been used to single out Press TV has been to attack many of its high-profile presenters through other media outlets. This includes the former Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone. Both ITV and BBC broadcast reports on the same exact day attacking Press TV and criticising Ken Livingstone for working on the channel. The two reports, although broadcast on different channels, interviewed the exact same guests.
Well, it was Greg Hands, very right-wing, hardline Tory MP for Fulham and Chelsea, who suddenly came out and announced I shouldn't be on Press TV, overlooking the fact, of course, that David Cameron's former Chief of Staff has been my guest on 2 programmes.
Majid Bahari was seen attending the Foreign Office's Human Rights and Democracy Report Conference, along with Britain's Foreign Secretary, William Hague. It seemed apparent then that the Foreign Office was trying to politicise Bahari's case, even though it was still under investigation. While the Bahari case was still under Ofcom investigation, the BBC aired a Panorama special and raised this case once more. But would the BBC, through its programming, reflect government policy on such issues? I asked the respected British statesman Tony Benn his views.
Well, the BBC was set up by the government as a public organisation. It's funded by a licence fee which everybody has to pay. And I suppose the BBC probably regards its duty as reflecting government policy. And in general, that's what they've done, although they claim to be impartial on controversial questions. I used to work for the BBC World Service myself, and I have a very high regard for the old BBC, and I think it has changed over the years and is not what it was set up to be or what people want it to be.
This week on Sky News, join me in London.
While the rest of the British media were giving glamorous and rather fawning coverage of the royal wedding, Press TV gave its platform to opponents of the monarchy and Republicans. Certain British officials later showed their dissatisfaction with Press TV for doing this. Despite the claims made by Ofcom to be independent of all external influences, some of the points made in a recent Sunday Times article imply that this is not the case in this instance. Just the day before Ofcom's ruling was published, a sudden Sunday Times article attacked Press TV using Bahari's allegations, and once more caused unfair prejudice to the ruling of the case. The article also announced that the Ofcom decision on Bahari's allegation would be released later that week. Press TV asked how the writer, Dipesh Gardner, knew that the ruling was about to be released. But can media outlets deliberately create a false impression in the UK, where, supposedly, there is free speech?
And the way that they do this in the spy agencies, I mean, certainly in MI6 they have a section called Information Operations, which has a sort of grouping of tame journalists, of pet journalists who are favoured out on the national media, and they will wave information in front of them and say, can you perhaps just write a story along these lines? And then the story goes into print, and then it becomes fact because it's been printed in the national newspaper. So you build up a sort of paper trail.
Of course, there are meetings that bring them together with government at informal levels. Many might have gone to university together, and indeed at formal level. The a Society of Editors, for example, meets that often as Ministry of Defence people, sometimes from the security services. And of course, many national newspaper editors, directors of news at various media organisations, they often will meet, for example, the head of MI6. They'll be whisked into that building on the Thames and have a lunch with them.
I believe that this person, Bahari, is being used, or what happened to him is being used by more powerful agencies to try and close us. Because this is part of a general assault. Long before this story, we've had repeated newspaper trumped-up stories, usually in the Sunday Times, which is the sewer of choice of the British intelligence and British political class, and the action taken by the NatWest Bank in closing down our bank account without any warning, even though there was plenty of money in it and it was being conducted impeccably. This is all clearly effort after effort to make difficulties for us as a prelude to closing us down.
So the crucial question remains, why are there continuous attempts to silence Press TV? Whilst there is no evidence to suggest that the decision by Ofcom is politically motivated, shocking new documents have shown US and British diplomats discussing ways to limit Press TV. The question is Ofcom being used as part of this campaign? The controversial disclosures from WikiLeaks expose the sinister workings within Western corridors of power. Exactly how close are the links between the state and the supposed free media?
We saw from WikiLeaks that clearly Press TV is being discussed diplomatically by the British government and amongst perhaps Western governments, because clearly the message is something that they don't like, that clearly most governments would prefer a tame media. Now, the point is that many of the newspapers and broadcasters in Britain actually do reflect British government policy, especially when it comes to what is defined as the national interest or Britain's strategic interest.
If you ask most spies, they tend to confuse protecting national security, which is the integrity of the UK, with protecting the national interest, which is not a legally defined term and which usually tends to coincide with the interests of the people running MI6 or running the oil companies or running the arms companies or in politics or the media.
When it comes to Press TV, certainly I think it's a target that principles of free speech are sort of relegated to what some people might pronounce to be Britain's national interest, and that national interest may not actually be Britain's interest, but more the interests of the large oil companies or the arms manufacturers, or those that the government and certain important people who own the newspapers, those are the interests that they may wish to propagate, and those may be also coincide with the need to perhaps silence Press TV.
And according to Mr. Livingston, these efforts originate from the US Embassy in London.
Clearly the bulk of the attacks on Press TV are orchestrated by the American Embassy. That's clear from the leaks in WikiLeaks. They pressured the British government to close it. They couldn't find a reason to. Pressure was put on Ofcom to say that you're unbalanced and you should be closed down. They couldn't find any grounds. Clearly there's been pressure on the NatWest Bank to close your account, and it might be that the pressure on me to not come on the programme is part of that. But we shouldn't allow the American Embassy to intervene to close a British company, because although primarily you make programmes for Iranian TV, it remains a British company, nor should they have any say over what is being broadcast on our airwaves. Because if they get away with it for this, then there'll start to be other pressure on other production companies about should they be producing anything that's critical of America's economic and military interests.
The same Sunday Times article we referred to earlier, perhaps mistakenly, published shocking news which revealed the wishes of the Foreign Office to silence Press TV. The article referred to an unnamed British diplomat who said that he would like to see Press TV shut down if he had his way.
Well, the designation given to him in the Sunday Times interview was as a high Foreign Office official. That could be anyone from the head of the Iranian desk in the Foreign Office to the head of the Foreign Office, or even the Foreign Secretary or Foreign Ministers in the government. But it sits entirely, it fits perfectly with the WikiLeaks cable, which described almost in real time a discussion between an American official and a British Foreign Office official, in which it was discussed the ways that they could construct the case that could, in the end, close Press TV down. So whoever it was in the Foreign Office, I have no doubt that the person existed. I don't think the Sunday Times made it up. I think they were spoon-fed this story by the British Foreign Office, by MI6, which is a part of the British Foreign Office, and is under the control of the British Foreign Office, so it's the same thing.
I think more than something to answer for, they are just showing how they are against any different and alternative view coming out. The monopoly that they had on press and media during the last few years have made them used to a sort of monovocal propaganda. Now that Press TV is giving a different, an alternative interpretation of the events, an alternative account of the events, I think they are very upset, and that's why they are attacking Press TV.
They would like to extinguish this single voice, more or less lonely voice, across the whole of the television spectrum, which is viewing events in the world from our perspective. They're disturbed by the fact that Press TV has built a huge audience. They never expected that. They thought that a television station emanating from Iran, Ayatollah TV, and all the epithets that they have tried to get the media to throw at us would turn people away from us. But in fact, because of the excellence of the reporting, and because, if I may say so, because of the quality of some of the programs, they've discovered that more and more and more people in Britain are watching us.
Is there a danger that this case is being politicised and is actually linked to overall attempts to sanction and pressurise Iran geopolitically?
Well, I think Press TV is seen by most people in the British media as a voice of the Iranian state. And rather than looking at the content of what it broadcasts, the ideas, and in fact, the new range of ideas that you don't get on other output, it is seen simply as a voice of a state, and it is seen as part of the geopolitics of Britain's relations to Iran, because Iran challenges, in a way, the hegemony of Western powers in the Middle East.
The problem for Press TV is it's most probably the only channel available to most people in Britain where you can see the Palestinian case fairly presented. And that is something that you have very powerful interests that don't want that out there in the public domain.
It's undeniable that over the last 4 years, Press TV has been a voice for those who've been shut out by the mainstream media. To this end, there have been numerous attempts to try to silence the channel. In response to these, Press TV insists that it will never stop in its mission of being a voice for the voiceless.